Alright, so if you're looking for a budget 3.5-inch Cinewhoop, DarwinFPV now has this model that should have you covered, the CineApe35. This one here is the analog version. It does come in a number of other versions, of course, digital VTXs, DJI-03, etc. Check the link in the description and you'll be able to find the version that you're looking for. This one here is obviously the cheapest version of being analog. It comes in at $200, or just all under $200, like $199.99. Pretty sure it's the lowest cost 3.5-inch Cinewhoop that I'm aware of, and they have a little chart here that shows you some other comparable models from other vendors, and some of these can be pretty pricey. I've flown a lot of these already. This one here, I can tell you right off the bat, it performs pretty well, especially for the price point. Doesn't have a specific tune for this model. It's just Betaflight default PIDs on, I think, 4.4.2 with a little bit of tweaks to filters. But on this setup here, it seems to fly no problem. No weird oscillations or noise or anything like that I can hear of in terms of issues, so seems to be okay. So really quickly, what you get in the box here, you get a little bag here, you get some foam, so if you want to put that on the outside of the prop guards, you can do that to protect your walls if you're flying it indoors. Spare screws and nuts there in case you lose any, stickers, and some zip ties in case you need to secure any of the wires. So you do get a manual that is specific to the CineApe35, pretty decent, comes in Chinese and English. It does explain some things, like for example, this has an SPI Express LRS receiver, and some of the times if your packet rate is too high, it won't connect. So for SPI receivers, it's 250 Hertz by default, for example. And covers other things like your Betaflight settings, transmitter switches, etc. Pretty good overall. The flight controller in here, it's an all-in-one, but it's kind of it's different. It's a flight controller plus an ESC. So two separate boards, but instead of them being in a stack configuration, they're kind of like glued together. So it's technically two boards, but it's an all-in-one flight controller ESC, and it has this kind of strange setup here where the ESCs have the motor wires coming out the side, even though this is a 25 by 25 mounting pattern for typically for whoops. So this is going to be kind of new. I think we're going to see more of these in the industry, because there's a lot of frames that have 25mm mounting holes, but they're oriented so that the so it's like basically square instead of it in a diamond formation, where the pointy end is pointed towards the front, and then the motor wires are going to be on the side like this, which is going to be more convenient for wiring it up. And additionally, this one has a bunch of waterproofing stuff on there, it's gray glue type stuff. It's, I think, to prevent shorts from if you land in wet grass, for example, that kind of thing. It's not going to be submersible, but it's going to give you a little bit of extra protection. So I did notice that on there. I tried to film it, but it's basically not visible because it's kind of in a tight spot. I'll show you exactly where it is here in a second on the quad. And of course you get a set of stickers. So here's a look at the frame, the whole build here, pretty standard here. So a lot of these Cinewhoops, basically anything from 2 to 2.5 inches, 3 to 3.5 inches now, are coming in this kind of pretty standard configuration. So you have a carbon plate that holds all the motors and an inverted sort of setup here, and so the props are inverted as well, and the thrust is being pushed down. And then you have some standoffs that are attached to the carbon plate, and then the prop guard is attached to the these little standoffs. So yeah, for those of you guys that are into the giveaways and stuff, let me know in the comments below some of the other models that are of this same sort of configuration. There's a whole bunch of them already. I've already reviewed a whole bunch of them, but name some of those out there. If you name them in your comments, I will give you some extra entries into a future giveaway, assuming this video is selected, of course, randomly selected in that future giveaway. But you can see right here, that is where the all-in-one board is there. It is 25 by 25 mounting pattern. You see that gray stuff right there? That is that kind of glue water protection sort of stuff, and that's on both sides. And you see the motor wires are on the side right here. Go ahead and take the battery off, and then now you can see the other side of the flight controller over here, you got some plugs on this side over here, and then also under the battery strap over here, there's some additional plugs that go to some other accessories, like the GPS in the front. I'll talk about that here in a second. You've got a plug over here, a little silicone plug for the USB-C port. So yeah, it's not fully waterproof, but it's going to give you a little bit of protection from splashes and stuff. Got your XD60 connector here going to the flight controller for power. And you've got a 3D print here that is holding the VTX antenna. It's just a standard whip antenna that goes to the VTX that is attached to this bottom carbon plate here. That is a 1 watt VTX, so it goes all up to 1 watt. The connector there is an MMCX connector. I'm not going to be able to show it to you because it's too dark, but I can tell you that it is. It's on a right angle, and it's pretty long, but I wish it were actually longer because it only comes out this far. And in this configuration here, when I was flying, you'll see in the narrated flight, I'm off in this direction here with the camera and the battery blocking the video, so you get a lot of reflections, even though it is, I think I was flying at 600 watts at the time. And you'll see that in the DVR feed. And then the receiver antenna for the SPI receiver for Express LRS comes out of this top section here. And yeah, I don't really like that. It's kind of, these are kind of close together. So what I try to do is I try to bend this kind of 90 degrees like this, so that there's a little bit of separation between the video and the receiver signal. I think that could have been put somewhere else. Maybe you could reroute it. Instead of coming out here, you could put out the back and then tape it to the back with this prop guard. That might help if you're having some issues with signal, but I didn't fly too far away, so I didn't have too many issues. You got 3D print here for your GoPro mount, a GoPro style mount, but the print seems to have an issue. I couldn't find mounts that would work really well with this. So I have like this third-party mount on this Hero 11 Mini that was a little bit thinner, because this center part of this print here is a little bit too thick. So a lot of my regular GoPros that have the finger mounts would not go in here. It was actually very hard even getting this one in here, because these mounts are a little bit thinner because this center part's a little bit too thick. So I'm going to give that feedback to DarwinFPV. Maybe they'll correct that for future batches, because this one here was very tough to get that in there. And then this little screw here with the nut is not included. They typically include this. I had to pull this off of another build. And then there's a 3D print here for the GPS. Not sure why it had to be angled like this. It's probably fine being totally flat. Maybe they did that because of this camera hole here, but it's a pretty small camera. It's a nano 14mm camera. It's the Caddx Ant. Again, sticking with the budget theme here, low cost components. That's what they went for here. So I'm not sure if that angle is needed. It is a new GPS I've never heard of before, like the GM8, I believe. It does pick up satellites pretty quickly, and it's probably because it's far away from the video transmission antenna, whereas on models from like previous years, the GPS will be back here in the worst spot. This is better. Now the camera here just kind of physically block this a little bit. It took me about a minute and a half to get a full lock of 8 satellites, and GPS rescue is enabled on this out of the box, and it won't let you take off until you get 8 satellites to lock. It took about a minute and a half for this GPS to lock, but that's actually pretty fast compared to previous, GPSs in the past. Now, I did have this Hero 11 Mini has GoPro Labs firmware on it, so I turned off all of the radios. So there's no Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth transmitting out of this camera, which is what you're going to want to do if you're having any issues with the GPS. If you use a regular GoPro with those things turned on, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, whatever, and don't turn those radios off, it may take a little longer for you to lock your signal on GPS here. But once you get 8, took off, and you're up to like 10, 12, 13 pretty quickly after you take off. So it does seem to work pretty well. The motors on here are 2006 motors. I'm not sure if you will see that. It's upside down. These are 2030 kV. This is obviously the 6S version, and I flew with this 6S 1300 milliamp hour GNB battery. It's if you want the 4S version, I think it's like 3500 or 3400 kV. So this one here has the jump fan D90 tri-bladed props here. These are the Cinewhoop props with the bull-nosed edge, so they're pretty loud. And then you hear that in the narrated flight. I fly it around with the audio so you can hear how loud this is, because everyone wants to know how loud it is, and yeah, it's pretty loud. I forgot to mention the ESC is a 4-in-1 ESC, of course. It is 45 amps and does have BLHeli-S firmware. That I believe it has BlueJay firmware, but I didn't check which version it is. I think it's one of the more recent ones, but yeah, it has BlueJay firmware on there. It does have RPM filter enabled out of the box, so that is another tuning thing that they did that isn't Betaflight default, so they did a little bit extra tuning there, which is good. And the carbon plate here is 3.5 millimeters thick, so yeah, it's going to definitely hold up to crashes and bangs and stuff. No problem. The prop guards are definitely going to break before you break this frame for sure. Alright, so here is how much it weighs. Took off all the stuff here, so it's 278 with no GoPro, no battery, and then let's go ahead and put the GoPro that I flew with on here. So with the GoPro, it comes in at 411.2, and with just the battery, it's 471.6, and then with everything, GoPro and battery, we're coming at 604.5. And I forgot to mention that on this battery, the 1306S, I get roughly 5.5 to 6 minutes of flight, depending on how windy it is and stuff. Obviously, you can go for a bigger battery. I think there's this could probably fit a 6S 1500. It's pretty tight here, especially if you have a lot of angle on your camera, the GoPro. So nothing too much wider than this, and maybe something taller would be fine. It might be possible to go sideways in the battery. I'm not sure how you would do that though. Doesn't look like there's mounting points in the frame for a sideways battery. That's probably would have been better, so I'm going to suggest that as well to DarwinFPV. But yeah, 5.5 minutes to 6 minutes, pretty reasonable for a 6S 1300. I think this is probably the target battery you want to go for. But overall, I'm very impressed for the price point. You know, just under 200 bucks. You got a 3.5-inch Cinewhoop that's going to perform as well, or maybe better than some of the other stuff that's out there. Now, they didn't send me the digital version, so it's going to add a little bit of weight, but I don't think it's going to make that much difference in terms of performance. It might cut into the flight time a little bit on some of the heavier ones with O3 or Walksnail or whatever other digital versions are out there. But the flight performance is probably going to be pretty much the same as what you're seeing here from the analog version. Anyway, I'm going to link the full narrated flight in the video description. I probably posted that to my second channel. I'll link to the quad as well as the battery down in the video description as well. If you got any questions, let me know, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video.